Hello and welcome to another sit down video. I think it was probably vlog day today, but I've got my mum up at the moment and I'm spending a bit of quality time with her. So trying to do 2 sit down videos today, but it just might be 1 this week. So this sit down video is going to be about my stomach condition. I often get people private message me asking about my stomach condition, what I actually have, how I cope day to day, how I maintain a job. So I thought this was a pretty good one to sit down and chat about. It might be a little bit lengthy, so go get a cuppa, grab some biscuits, some cookies, and let's fill you in. So I have actually done like a whole how I'm gonna chop this video down, because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to dissect, basically. I think this is the right time to have sat down and put this video together and chat about it, because I'm currently in therapy and my stomach is a big topic, mainly because it involves anxiety and so forth. It's kind of a bit of a vicious circle. So if I get a stomach flare up, I get anxiety. If I have anxiety, I can also get a stomach flare up. So it's a bit nasty. So with therapy in mind, I just wanted to run down a few things that maybe exacerbated anxiety and my stomach symptoms. So my parents got divorced at a very early age. In therapy, when we were talking about what age I feel I was when all these stomach symptoms cropped up and became a thing, I immediately went to like 7-ish years old. Don't know whether that's right or not, but that's what felt right. So my parents getting divorced, I don't know whether amicable's the right word, but it wasn't a pleasant separating. I saw a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have. There's a lot of trauma there. I think 7 times out of 10, I'm sure, kids seeing their parents getting divorced is never pleasant and traumatizing, and it's going to stick with you. And how we've pinpointed things is the fact that it was change. There was change happening in my routine. I think for children, routine is very, very important. The change in routine can cause anxiety and other things, I'm sure, come along with it. Bad behaviour, kids playing up, maybe being shy. I'm sure there's like a list of things. For me, I was probably a lot quieter. I wasn't a confident, bubbly child. It's a little weird. Going through those times and moments, I do think my parents separating was a catalyst to all of this. I think it was because there was a lot of uncertainty. Not that I would like to say like back then I wish my parents would have sat me down and were more civil and explained things to us. Maybe that would have made me, and I can't speak on behalf of my siblings, but maybe would have made me feel a little bit more settled, have a better understanding, digest it better. I don't know. So I think that kind of covers the anxiety, and it's really hard to just not jump in and say what I have now, because back then this is so hard to explain. There's 2 sides. Like I can get a flare up, which is very, very painful, borderline I need to call an ambulance and like need help to ease the pain. I don't know, I feel like it's serious basically. And then I can have these mini flare-ups, which I think are exacerbated by stress, anxiety, being nervous, overthinking, and they aren't as bad, but it's kind of mimics IBS. So I feel like, yes, back then, maybe my symptoms were a bit more IBS, but there's one particular memory that I have of my mum went out and I had a babysitter, and I had the worst stomach pains ever. I was sitting on the toilet and I was crying, like screaming in pain, and the babysitter had to call my mum to come back home. And I remember her like unlocking the door and coming in, and it's like everyone's staring at me on the toilet and nothing was happening, but I was in like excruciating pain. And we just didn't know what it was. It wasn't like I was being sick and like I had diarrhea and it was from a bad dinner or food poisoning or something like that. And the only thing we could kind of like narrow it down to was that I had a can of Coke. Don't know whether it was a Diet Coke or whatever it was, but we just thought it was like the carbonation or something. It was just I don't have the best memory, but I just remember sitting on the toilet and everyone was staring at me. Similar incidences would crop up, so they weren't necessarily back to back, but when I would have these, my mum would get me a hot water bottle. Like, you could see my stomach like dipping in, and I don't know what it was, whether that was the cramping. And I used to my mum would get me this hot water bottle with a casing on it, and I would take it off and I would literally burn my stomach to suppress the pain or distract that pain onto a different pain. And I would have such a veiny belly, and it was just red raw. It was horrible. And these pains, I think, looking back and just from like that long period of time and analysing those like many moments, these pains would come in waves. So I'd get a really, really bad pain, and it would take my breath away, and I would be in two on the floor, like borderline screaming in pain. And then it would kind of go, and then I'd think I'd be okay, and then it would come back again, and this would last for about an hour and a half. So obviously scary indeed. My mum would take me back and forth from the doctors. We did exclusion of food, so we took wheat out of my diet, trialled that. I think that was helpful. Like that and gluten was helpful. We did dairy free. I don't think we did sugar free, but I wasn't someone that ate a lot of sugar really. But I was just, very mindful of what I had from the food point of view. Like, did a FODMAP diet. If you know, you know. I do remember my mum taking like onion and garlic out of meals. But when we were going back and forth from the doctors, it was very much like, your child has IBS. I was given we tried Mebeverin, should have written a list of these. We tried fibre gel because mine was more like constipation based. Tried a Meprazole. I obviously had blood tests and things like that. I wouldn't say that the doctors back then were terrible, but it was just, I just feel like we were getting nowhere, and it only got worse. I also went to a private school, and I feel like the friends I had that went to state schools maybe didn't have the same pressure as what I experienced in a private school. It was like, if you were getting anything lower than a C, then you were just I don't know, frowned upon, I suppose. It wasn't great. And with, the addition of being a woman and getting your period, dealing with that every month, I felt like my periods were worse than my peers. It was just a whole thing. So I was definitely managing anxiety, stress, and then on top of this, just being labelled with IBS, which IBS should be manageable. Or you at least have mechanisms to help you when it's okay, I know I'm about to have a bad time. So whether it's tablets you have and take with you in your bag, you know that it's just going to be over within half an hour. For me, it was it became PTSD, where I was just I can't do this. I wanted my mum to call an ambulance. I really struggled being social. It just wasn't a fun time. With going back and forth from the doctors in mind, we got a referral to a gastroenterologist. And I'm going to be honest, I don't feel like it progressed very well from there either. We went back to the FODMAP diet, and following that, I also had an ultrasound. It just didn't get anywhere. And it was really disheartening to not have any answers, especially when at that time going through GCSEs, wanting to be social with friends. I wouldn't say I was unsociable, but I think I was probably extra quiet and not as confident as I could have been, because I didn't know when my next flare-up would come. Diverticulitis came up quite a bit, but got ruled out. So it was oh, haven't heard this before, but yeah, you don't have it. So I was cool. Now we're moving into college, 20s kind of times. And I'm going to be honest, not a lot changed. The only thing that I would say that did help was therapy. My mum got me into therapy. It was possibly the best decision. And a big reason why I started therapy was because I was scared to go on a bus. I mean, other things too. I decided that I didn't want to stay on at the private school that I was at and do A-levels. They weren't doing the subjects that I wanted to do, which was more creative. I would say the school that I went to was very academic based and sporty. Now, I was netball captain and rounders captain and enjoyed that. I wouldn't say I was fantastic and amazing. I was involved enough to play the role of a captain and be on like the A team of those. So take that as what you will. But it wasn't something that at GCSEs I want to study sport, and it was an avenue that I wanted to go down. And for the academic side of things, well, I was so bad at science that I was advised to drop of additional science because it was going to bring down the national average. So yeah, looking back, just being, you know, a 32 almost year old lady at a time where Andrew and I are having the conversation about children, I really am overconscious now of just like, if we do have a child, what they're going to excel at and what they naturally enjoy doing. And I feel like I should have gone to a Steiner school. I feel like I would have excelled better in a more stress-free environment, less judgment, less pressure, so that I had, I don't know, a safer space to evolve, grow, thrive. And I think I would have loved to be in an environment where it wasn't so structured. And from what I've seen of Steiner schools and was aware of back then at the time, they did more outdoorsy things, and it was just being more one with yourself, and there's basically more to life than frickin' grades. And if you are an academic person, then being in an environment where they push you and help you to be the best that you are, I 100% feel like that would obviously be a best option for you. But I was very creative and I don't know, just needed a more softer environment, which I think my experience of secondary school would have been a lot nicer if I was in a different environment, because that would have helped maybe my health. I don't know. So going back to therapy was amazing, and knowing that the college that I wanted to go to, which had the subjects that I wanted to study, required me to go on a bus. I was very familiar with trains because sometimes I would take the train home from secondary school. I would get the train to go see my friends, but buses, I get car sick as well. So buses just weren't my best friend. And the bus that I would have to take 5 days a week, 4 days a week was about an hour long. I basically, had therapy to break that down and feel a bit more secure about it. When my friends at college started to learn how to drive, I would get lifts with them and whatnot. But ultimately, I went to college. It was a whole new experience. There were times where obviously like boyfriends came onto the scene, and I don't know how I managed that. I don't know how I managed to have relationships with boys and explain my health situation. I think I was very blasé about it all, out of sight, out of mind. But there were often sometimes where I would have flare-ups and I would be in a lot of pain, and it was like calling my mum and getting her to come pick me up from their house. And it would freak me out, and it would be like another setback. But boyfriends were really supportive, and they were like, look, if you need to go to the toilet, just go to the toilet, like I don't mind. But it was like, no, the problem is that I can't go to the toilet. I'm in a lot of pain and I don't know what's going on with my body. It was a lot of being in the dark and not having answers. So then there was unpredictability. And at this point in college and towards the end of college, I just started to lose all my friends. I was kind of labelled as I was unreliable. I wasn't necessarily fun to be around. It took me back to secondary school where I got teased for being a hypochondriac, because back then it was like I was dealing with really, really bad periods, which was obviously happen once a month. And then I was also dealing with stomach problems alongside with that. What I found with coming towards the end of my period, I would get really, really, really bad flare-ups. And I think that is just all the pressure that your period gives you, like your lower back. And I think also when you are ovulating as well. You'd get ovulation pains. It was just a lot to deal with. And being in your late teens and then now early 20s, the last thing I wanted to do was go out clubbing and drink. I tried it, I did do it, but I would get a backlash from it. I would be very, very poorly. I would notice I would have more flare-ups. It was a lot. But now coming to a big turning point in my 20s, and that was when I met Andrew. I'm going to try and not be soppy about this, but this does speak a lot about his character and his parents too. So by this point I'd moved out, I was living on my own, and I was trying to navigate what I could do. I started working for my dad to give me a bit of security. But yeah, when I met Andrew, I actually love our story, and I might save it for a Q&A because I've already had someone ask in a Q&A how Andrew and I met, and I cannot wait to tell that story. I wouldn't say Andrew and I had dates because a big thing about me was that I wouldn't go out for dinner. And when you are trying to meet someone, I'm sure that they want to take you out for a drink, they want to take you out for dinner, and those things I just didn't feel comfortable with because food was a catalyst and alcohol was a catalyst. Not necessarily a given, but I know that it could potentially bring on a flare-up. So it was just, I can't do any of those things. So the few times Andrew would like come back to mine and we'd hang out and chat and whatnot, there was just, you know, the topic of, oh, I would like to cook you dinner. I was like, oh, that's really nice, Andrew. It might have been like our third or fourth date, I'm not sure. And he made me dinner and I wrote him a letter. And this is possibly the funniest story that I have, because at that time, all I knew was that the doctors have told me I've got IBS. And I thought that was such a shameful thing. And I am a girl, I'm supposed to be attractive, but I have bowel problems, like gross. And I gave myself such a hard time that I decided to write Andrew a letter. And I basically, I don't know, he probably doesn't have this letter anymore. But I wrote him a letter and it was like basically a rundown of like my life and how much pain at that, like I get with my stomach and everything. And at the end it was like, so basically like I have IBS. And I was sitting there waiting for him to read the letter, and he looked up and was like, yeah, like I have IBS too. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I've made this big thing so scary and as if I'm the only person in the world that has this. And he just turns around like, yeah, like I get the shits all the time too. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that was quite funny. But ultimately, like, as our relationship went on and we opened up, there were various times where I would have to call him back from work and get him to take me to A&E. This is where my health took a turn. So for all I knew, I had IBS and it was really, really bad. None of the medication was working. All the tips and tricks weren't working. The only thing that kind of worked was a scalding hot water bottle. I would self-harm effectively. Andrew was like, this is not right. You should not be in two on the floor. This is scary. I'm taking you to the hospital. We went to A&E within a span of like 2 weeks. I want to say like 3-4 times. One of those times, Andrew couldn't get out of work and come back, and Andrew's mum had to take me to the hospital. It was so, so bad. I've also forgotten one really crucial thing. When I was back at college, I had a really, really, really bad flare-up boyfriend that took me to the hospital, and I ended up having my appendix out. That was like a whole other thing. So that was a confusion of pain, but I have had my appendix out. Anyway, going back, like I have done notes and everything, but clearly I'm just not very good at relaying information. So with A&E just constantly on the cards, things weren't great. So the last time I remember leaving A&E, I don't know why I'm doing this because it's not over there, I left with a bottle of Oromorph for pain and a bottle of Movicol to help me go to the toilet, because Oromorph locks you up but deals with pain. Movicol obviously like helps you go to the toilet. So those were kind of like doing their job, but it's because they were both like just an absolute nightmare. And this is where I'm really thankful for Andrew, because Andrew was like, this just, I've had enough. This is not great. We're not getting anywhere. This is not an NHS bashing, by the way. It was just my experience, but like I wasn't getting anywhere. This must have been like a year into our relationship, maybe longer. We decided to get a private appointment with a gastroenterologist, which funnily enough was the same gastroenterologist that I was seeing at the hospital, which I don't understand. I had my appointment, sat down, explained everything again, and he advised me to do a test which involved swallowing some tablets. It was like one tablet every day for 4 days, and then you have an x-ray at the end of the week, I think, or the 5th day. So long ago, I can't really remember. So I agreed to do that, but I did that whole test through the NHS. So then I had to wait, I think, 3 months to do that through the NHS because I couldn't afford to pay for it privately. But Andrew and I got money together to do the private appointment with the gastroenterologist, but we just did the whole tests through the NHS, and then I came back to see him for the results. So a little bit backwards, but I hope that makes sense. Basically, what my results showed me was that it was those tablets from the x-ray were not very far through my stomach. I'm really sorry, but I'm gonna have to interject here because I did such a bad job at explaining this. So the test I had done was a colonic transit study, and this study checks how quickly food moves through your large bowel. Not through your stomach, through your bowel. This was like, I'm not gonna lie, this was like almost 10 years ago. So before the x-ray, you swallow 6 capsules, 2 capsules a day for 3 days. These capsules contain small markers which show up on the x-ray. So it just basically works out how slow or fast things are just traveling through your system. I'm so sorry. I'm really not good at remembering or relaying information. He worked out that I have slow transit constipation. What does that mean? Well, I think STC, kind of like slow transit constipation, probably is very self-explanatory. But what I actually found out, what my body doesn't do is draw enough water into my bowels so that everything can move. So basically, I have a lazy gut. So I finally got a diagnosis and was immediately put onto some medication. Now, the medication that I got put onto only lasted 2 years because it got discontinued. Well, I think it actually got bought by the US. It was called lubiprostone. Yeah, I finally got on well with it. Like, I adjusted to it. Like, I became a brand new person and was just so happy and over the moon. My flare-ups are pretty much gone. Something that I didn't mention was that there were, I'm going to say, 2 occasions where I had passed out from pain. I had been in so much pain, I would be sick and would pass out. Now, I really do focus on my breathing when I get flare-ups or really bad flare-ups. That does help, but ultimately, when you are in really excruciating pain that takes your breath away, and it's almost like you've got so much pressure here that it needs to go down there, but it needs to come out there, and you also want to pass out. Like, it was a horrendous ball of just discomfort, and yeah. So the idea of not having to go through that so frequently or at all was just incredible. I did have to change to the medication I am on now. It was hard to get the dosage right. I will tell this story because I'm not embarrassed. When I was going through the motions of getting on this medication, there were times where it'd make me feel sick and I would have to go and sleep because the sickness was so bad. But then there was times where I was like, oh my God, I need the toilet, and I would shit myself. And I remember just getting into the car and I said to Andrew, I was like, oh my God, no, I've got to go back inside, I've got to go back inside. And I didn't quite make it. Great stories to tell potential kids and the internet apparently. But I can tell you now, I have got the dosage right. And it's medication that I'm just going to have to be on for the rest of my life unless I can manage to do this all naturally. But I'm not there yet, and it's not something I really want to fiddle with. So a few things I probably have missed. I could have gone in deep and detailed. I just wanted to give you like a rough idea of like how I got to a diagnosis, because I think what's important now is like where my life's at, and particularly the last year that I've had, because the last year I've had has not been great. So where I'm at now, I am self-employed. I am basically a content creator for businesses, and that works on my time. Last year was absolutely horrendous. The year before that, Andrew and I got married. We went on a dream holiday with our friends, and life was just so incredible. I was so happy, living my best life. And I was at that time weaning myself off of antidepressants. I felt like it was the right time. Everything was fine. Well, everything was not fine, because we moved into 2023 and it was absolute carnage. It's really hard to explain stress, anxiety, and PTSD. Looking at last year was such a blur. February, I had good days and bad days. Earlier that year, had the worst flare up in about 6 years, and that threw me through a loop. Now being in therapy, and there's a book that my therapist gave me that I'm currently reading. I have PTSD from my flare-ups. From that initial flare-up I had last year, I went into a hole that I really, really struggled to come out of. And I didn't speak to friends. I barely saw friends. I struggled to leave the house. I was so scared of having another flare up again and being away from home. The unpredictability, I couldn't do my job anymore. It was just so absolutely horrific. Like it was a flare up where I almost passed out. I threw up all over the bathroom, and I was literally on the toilet, and I was like trying to yell Andrew's name, and I really like struggled to speak and get it out. He finally got up, and I was like, my legs were shaking, was so unwell, and Andrew was like holding my hand, like rubbing my back, like trying to help me breathe. And it was just something that took me about 6 months to get out of. I could cry thinking about it. It was just so scary. And I think about where I'm at now, and I have good days and bad days, but it was just awful, like so awful. And I would never, ever want anyone to experience it. With being on medication for the rest of your life, you've got a chronic condition. I think I thought that my life was going to be absolutely fine. I'm on medication now, like life is hunky-dory, but I call them flare-ups, and I didn't realise that some of them can be worse than others. Not being on antidepressants, which managed my stress and anxiety, I didn't realise how important it was for me to just maintain on something. I am someone, and I speak about it all the time, I'm about to go through a process of potentially being diagnosed as autistic. And from the research that I've done, a lot of people that end up having the autistic diagnosis end up going on some form or another of an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication to help with the overthinking, being overstimulated. And obviously this is a new discovery. I didn't expect coming off antidepressants to throw me into a year that I experienced last year. From being so happy and so content and living on cloud 9, living my best life with my friends. I'm now married, I'm a wife. Like, I felt like I got to a good point of like, not that I'll ever get over my dad passing, but like at that time, 4 or 5 years on from the grief and feeling like me again, I was just thriving. To then, go into a year where I was possibly at my lowest or near my lowest that I have ever been. I was a shell of myself. I ended up getting like private doctor's appointment. I was adamant that I didn't want to go back on antidepressants. I wanted to power through. You know, we were trying to manage like my stomach condition as well at the time. I didn't want to add antidepressants back into the mix again. So I went on like an antipsychotic medication, which was not like an antidepressant. It was something that I could take when I needed to take it. It didn't work for me. I'd already done like beta blockers as well. So we resorted back to diazepam. I wasn't taking diazepam every day, but if I was going on a job or it was a social gathering, I would most likely have been on diazepam. And I would always start at a low dose, but then if I needed to take another one to make it up to a higher dose, then I would. So a couple of months of doing that, I knew that I couldn't do this long term, and I didn't want to end up becoming addicted to something that was going to hinder me more than help me. So I went back on antidepressants, and I'm so glad that I did, because with that I decided to go into therapy. So I was doing something where I was like, I'm not happy that I'm having to go on antidepressants because I felt like it was a failure. but I saw it more as actually no, this is a tool to help me function at the best version of myself. So I'm taking medication, but pairing that with therapy is the best way to tackle it. You're getting support from a tablet, you're taking it every single day, chemically balancing you, but also like therapy is helping you mentally balanced. I am happy to say that I am the best version of myself currently. What I will say is I didn't do half the things I wanted to do last year. The beginning of last year, I actually set up a whole new business, which is something that I've been wanting to do for many, many years, and that is portrait photography, mainly with like babies, small children, and then I want to do like pets and things. I started that, it ran for about 2-3 months, and I had to stop. And that was such a massive passion of mine to build all that momentum, do all these shoots, to then start a year later again is so soul destroying, but also like life happens. My health is in a great place now. I am thankful to feel how I'm feeling currently. But what I will say was it was absolutely amazing to finish off 2023 with a honeymoon that we didn't expect to have. It was planned semi-last minute. We went to Disney the year before and we knew that we wanted to go again, just Andrew and I. We booked it and it was a very, very streamlined version. We weren't expecting me to be unwell, so plans kind of dwindled a little bit. But from Andrew working his bottom off and having all these opportunities, it just snowballed in such a wonderful way that we were able to have, with the help of family as well, the honeymoon of all honeymoons, a honeymoon that I never ever expected us to even have. The memories that I have are quite frankly magical. It was difficult in the sense that I was still managing my flare-ups, my anxiety, but I had mechanisms in place to get through it. After a really, really crap year, to end in November, December on a honeymoon was just perfect. It was just something that I never, ever, ever thought would pull such a crap year together. So that's pretty much the whole story. So where I'm at now, I am weaning myself back into working again. Mainly it is Andrew and I filming weddings, a good couple of weddings this year, one which is going to take us to Morocco, which I'm absolutely ecstatic about and didn't think that this year would bring something like that, but I'm excited for that. I am trying to maintain my weight, nutrients, like keeping my body happy and healthy. With anxiety and the things where I struggle is if I know that I'm going to do something that makes me feel nervous, so I need to leave the house, go to an appointment, like getting my hair done the other day. I didn't eat that morning because I was nervous. I need to make sure that I'm eating enough every single day so that I'm not getting into a place where I'm poorly and for a whole other reason. Another thing I'm working on is exercise. I would say I'm doing soft exercise. My goal is to do a Peloton class at least 30 minutes every single day, whether that's on the bike, doing yoga, doing stretching, whatever it might be, just to get my body moving, because my job does involve me sitting down quite a lot, editing, or I'm out and about doing a job, but majority of it I'm sitting on my computer and I'm editing. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm ticking that box and making sure that my body gets movement, because I do notice that my stomach is happier for that. With taking medication, drinking enough water, making sure that movement's there, I feel like everything flows the way it's supposed to. I'm sure that was way longer than it needed to be, and I really, really hope that I covered all possible bases, and if I haven't, please direct message me, leave a comment below. I would love to answer those for you. I tried to tell the story of my diagnosis. It is very much all over the place, and trying to get it out of my brain as well. Being a little bit neurospicy as I am, it's quite hard for me, but I have had so many of you just asking what stomach condition I have, how do I cope, my mechanisms. I'm still working out for myself. You now know my diagnosis. I have slow transit constipation. Also last year I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue, which is just something that I manage. I kind of always knew I had that. I've got an underactive thyroid as well, so it's just, I have my ailments. I try and function as best as I possibly can, but if we were all built the same, it would be so boring, wouldn't it? No, it'd be really helpful actually. Yeah, I just wanted to leave it on the note that I am very happy. I'm working on myself every single day, and I am so thankful to have reached this point and to have maintained this point. But I hope you are having a good day. I hope that this video was somewhat informative, if not helpful. On that note, I will see you very, very soon.